Goodness sakes, you can hear the cicadas screaming like no other out here today in Cook County, Illinois. Markham to be exact. And Markham sits just west of Harvey, south of Robbins. If you've seen my other videos on Harvey and Robbins, you know what kind of places those are. They're not doing so well these days. Markham isn't really doing all that well either. And it hasn't necessarily seen the amount of blight that Robbins has seen, and definitely not the amount of blight that Harvey has seen, but there's some parts of town where it looks like it's starting to head that way.
Oh yes, Markham, Illinois. Marked on the map about 25 miles southwest of the Loop, it's bordered by Harvey to the east, Posen and Midlothian to the north, Oak Forest to the west, and Country Club Hills, along with Hazel Crest, to the south. I start the video in one of the worst-looking neighborhoods because I know what you guys all want to see. This is off of Kedzie Avenue near the 294 and 57 interchange. Honestly though, after driving through the whole city, I can say that Markham isn't near as bad looking as some of the other suburbs that I've made videos on so far in this area. It actually looks really nice compared to places like Harvey, Dixmoor, or Robbins. Driving through those other places, you can't help but say, damn. Here, not as much. That being said, you can still find several Cook County board-up stamps on some of the homes here. Speaking of abandoned homes, that's to be expected when a city loses 4,000 people since 1980. I know. I can already hear Markham residents who find this video shouting at me in the comments about how other places have had it worse. I know. The majority of the homes here still have nice cut lawns, nicely maintained exteriors, and the neighborhoods appear to be well kept. I know. That's why I'm acknowledging as such at the beginning. But Markham is not problem-free. Also, before I talk about some of those problems, there's a rare feel-good story from this small municipality recently. An actual act of kindness, people. I know, right? Unheard of when thinking about all of the selfish, money-hungry, tax dollar-stealing mayors of this area. Make sure to stay tuned to hear that story. For now, let's begin on Markham's corruption timeline, shall we? Back in 2017, then Markham Mayor Davis Webb Jr. pled guilty to a bribery scheme where he allegedly pocketed $300,000 through wire fraud, filing a false tax return, and other things. He pled guilty to federal prosecutors on January 18, 2018, agreeing to pay back $331,000 to the city of Markham and more than $69,000 to the U.S. Treasury. Webb was indicted just a month prior in December of 2017 as a part of the alleged bribery scheme that included city contractors. The payments to Webb came in a variety of forms, including through shell companies, campaign contributions, and even cash that was hidden in coffee cups.
Hey you, intern, hand me that cup of coffee please on the shelf. No, not that one by the computer, the one over there on the shelf. That one is mine.
But sir, there's no liquid in it. It feels significantly lighter than the others.
That's because it's instant coffee. I need to put hot water in it first, so just hand it over to me, please.
Oh, okay. Actually, I can go put in some hot water in it for you, if that makes it easier.
Are you insulting me? Thinking that I can't put hot water in my own instant coffee? Give it to me now or you're fired. Yeah, that's what I thought. Thanks.
Jeez, I should have accepted the internship working for Oak Forest instead of here.
What was that?
Nothing.
Bruh.
Webb was given these bribes in exchange for giving contractors city contracts to work on the city's infrastructure and other projects, including a multi-million-dollar senior living center at Kedzie and 155th that was originally named the Davis Webb Jr. Senior Living Complex. Now it's just called the Markham Senior Living Center. Not only did these contractors get work, but they got overpaid. Of course, on the taxpayer's dime. When Webb admitted to accepting the bribes, that led to the takedown of contractor Michael Jerigis, who was the president of Tower Contracting, located in Markham. It was him who made many trips to Webb's office and gave Webb several coffee cups over time that were filled with cash, totaling to around $100,000 when it was all said and done. In return, Webb was said to have spent it on not only personal things but also on gambling at nearby casinos. Jarageese was sentenced to 41 months in prison as a result. Additionally, there was another contractor, Thomas Summers, owner of Alstretta Cartage and Construction, who was found guilty of bribing ex-Mayor Webb as much as $169,000. Payments came in the form of cash and checks that were written to KAT Remodeling, which was a shell company that Webb had set up in his children's name. So Webb had the whole thing planned out nicely for himself, with a way to easily wash the money that he was being given. Not planned out so nicely for his kids, though, because he put his kids at risk for being charged with some serious crimes, as the business was in their names.
Thanks, Daddy.
Summers even wrote memos on the checks like kitchen or Ford truck to help the checks seem more legit. Anyway, along with the senior living center that I mentioned earlier, other bribed construction projects in Markham included the City Hall and Police Complex that still stands today, along with a renovation to Rosner Park that occurred back in 2012. Well, when Mayor Webb was removed from office, it was former Markham Alderman Ernest Blevins who took over as interim mayor. It was actually someone else who had won an election, but that guy was being investigated for something else that we can get into in a bit. But yeah, things didn't get any better after Webb left office because it didn't take long for the 80-year-old Blevins' head to inflate like a balloon. Several months into the job, Blevins raised his own salary by more than $70,000 and ordered the city treasurer to pay him an additional $34,000 for the time that he had already served as the mayor. The self-given raise was illegal and was not authorized by the city treasurer, nor was there a vote to approve the notion by the city council. Instead, Blevins went to the almighty Markham HR department and asked for his salary to be raised. Blevins then filed a payroll change that included his newly requested salary. Blevins was the interim mayor for then newly elected and still current mayor Roger Agpawa. Despite Agpawa winning the election in 2017, the former fire chief for the neighboring suburb of Country Club Hills wasn't able to take the position due to a federal charge from 1999, where he committed federal mail fraud over a health insurance scandal. He wasn't able to become Markham's mayor until 2019, when then Illinois Governor Bruce Rauner restored Agpawa's citizens' rights. Agpawa didn't serve jail time for his 1999 federal charge, but he served 3 years of probation and gave 200 hours of community service. Agpawa thought that this whole thing was over back in 2019 after fighting for 2 years to be able to get past his prior federal charge, but it came back to haunt him during the next election in 2021. The problem was that Rauner didn't have the power to excuse Agpawa from his federal crime. It's Illinois state law that if you've been convicted of a federal crime, you cannot hold municipal office. So because of his federal charge, Agpawa was ineligible. Yet, here Agpawa was, serving as the mayor of Markham, and still is doing such to this day. Appellate court said that Agpawa's name should have never have been on the ballot to begin with. However, this all led to state lawmakers to adjust the language in the law because later in 2021, state lawmakers made it legal for Agpawa to be the mayor of Markham, as they added this to the law. Unless such person is again restored to his or her rights of citizenship that may have been forfeited under Illinois law as a result of conviction, which includes eligibility to hold elected municipal office by the terms of a pardon for the offense, has received a restoration of rights by the governor or otherwise according to law. So, it's not illegal anymore, but it was when Agpawa first became mayor of Markham. There's been other drama too in recent years among people working for the city of Markham. During the pandemic, there were only 311 licensed businesses in Markham, yet, if you recall, during the pandemic, there were Paycheck Protection Program loans that were handed out by the government to small business owners to help keep small businesses afloat during that weird period of time for our economy. Yet, despite there only being 311 licensed businesses in Markham, there were 1,733 small business owners who applied for and received the taxpayer-funded loans through the Paycheck Protection Program, and all of these business owners claimed to have operated out of Markham. And if you do the math, that's about 6 times as many small businesses than there actually are in Markham. Well, this caught the attention of Markham's city administrator, Derek Champion, when he saw the data. The CBS article mentions how 159th Street is full of vacant storefronts and how there's no way that there are even 1,000 small businesses operating out of Markham, let alone 1,733 of them. I can confirm the high amount of vacant storefronts along 159th Street in Markham, as that's where we are right now. Anyway, among those fake business owners was then Markham police officer Kenneth Muldrow when CBS News reporter Jermont Terry approached Muldrow to ask him about it. Muldrow then denied being himself. Muldrow applied for and received $20,000 of taxpayer money to keep his supposed landscaping company in business during the pandemic. The address on the loan application was the same for the Markham Police Department. Well, Muldrow was then put on administrative leave shortly after being caught, but that only led to Terry finding even more municipal workers in Markham that had done the same thing. Up to 10 employees for the city of Markham were discovered to have created a business for no other reason than to collect $20,000 of taxpayer money through the Paycheck Protection Program.
Damn.
The list included 2 other police officers, one of which being Rayshonda Lewis, who resigned after getting caught. She was on a 10-year run of being a Markham police officer. From mayors to police officers to librarians, Markham's former library director is up next. In 2023, Xavier Menzies was accused of stealing $800,000 from the city during a time frame that spanned over a decade. Menzies managed the library's finances, employees, and services until 2019. The library not only served Markham but also Posen, which the municipality paid Markham thousands of dollars a month in order for their residents to gain access to Markham's library. The embezzlement scheme started in 2009 when Menzies embezzled library funds, including the money that Posen gave to Markham. Instead of that money going to the library, however, Menzies put all of those funds into a secret bank account. The scheme was covered up by falsifying financial information during presentations to the library's Board of Trustees. Menzies also misappropriated checks that were written to the library by depositing them into his secret account. While Menzies was serving as the library director for Markham, he also held the same position for the neighboring suburb of Harvey. Additionally, Menzies was a pastor and ran a religious organization called the Christian Family Worship Center, which was in Hammond, Indiana. Menzies reportedly used the funds on personal items, including tickets to events, auto repairs, and home mortgage payments. Following Menzies' exit as the library director, longtime Markham library employee Bridget Rowland took over the position. Shortly after getting the job, the 62-year-old Rowland gave herself a $4,000 raise, making her salary to be $78,000. 2 weeks later, after realizing that she got away with it without anyone raising an eyebrow, she gave herself another raise, making her salary $83,000. The problem, however, is that any kind of pay increase for staff has to be officially approved by the library board, and it was never brought to their attention. This was back in late 2019, early 2020 when this happened, and it wasn't discovered until a new library director stepped in and caught what was happening. In early 2024, Rowland was fired after working for the library for 30 years, and she was charged with theft. Rowland also put over $16,000 towards her pension, stealing as much as $43,000 when it was all said and done. So yes, Markham has been a disaster of a city for a long time, as there's been many cases of corruption over the recent years. It doesn't appear to be stopping anytime soon either. I mean, you can't expect it to, right? However, I will cap off all of this with a story from the spring of 2024, where Markham donated a 2001 fire truck to Liberia, a country that had just 10 fire trucks to serve a nation of 6 million people. Markham resident Moriel McClurkin, an African Diaspora Union ambassador to the US and Canada, was credited for the assist in setting up the donation. After reaching out to multiple cities in the area, it was his city, Markham, that stepped up and donated an old fire truck to Liberia. Mayor Egpawa was given a robe and hat by Liberia officials, along with an invite to visit their country. Remember that before Egpawa was the mayor of Markham, he was the fire chief in Country Club Hills. Well, he said that if he's able to visit Liberia, that he will pass along firefighting knowledge to help them out even further, so there's that good news, at least, and something that was done right by Markham city officials. Now time for the economic stats for Markham. Today there's about 11,000 people who live in the city, down from 4.6% from the 2020 census count. The median household income is just below $48,000 per year, and only 16% of adults 25 and older hold a bachelor's degree or higher. The median value of owner-occupied housing units is very low, at $100,000, and the poverty rate is 23.2%. On to the crime rates now, and they're just slightly above the national average rate, with the violent crime rate being 400 for every 100,000 residents and the property crime rate being at 2,300 for every 100,000 residents. Certainly not the worst, and in the past, Markham has seen much higher crime rates than this. Seems like they've been able to limit that in recent years, so that's good at least. Otherwise, those are very poor numbers from an economic standpoint, obviously. Additionally, property taxes in Markham are ridiculous. Yeah, they are throughout all of Illinois, especially Cook County, or Crook County as many of you have told me in the comment sections of various videos. However, residents in Markham are paying property taxes as high as $6,000 on homes that are valued at $200,000. Keep in mind that the median home value in Markham is $100,000, but still, that's absurd. A report by CBS Chicago from 6 years ago exploited how some Markham residents were paying as much as $12,000 a year on homes that are valued at $200,000, and that was due to flaws in the system where two accounts were linked to the same property. Imagine going through that headache and trying to clear that up in court. I mean, you can do a search on it on your own if you want to know more about it. Even recently, Cook County increased their property taxes within a month of me uploading this video, and a story has gone viral of a homeowner in Chicago Heights that saw an increase in property taxes as high as 3,811%, making his 2024 property tax bill as high as $29,000. Before that, it was $1,800. And $29,000 is about 25% of the real value of his home. Yes, this is a real story. Go look it up. I couldn't believe it myself, but it's real. Apparently what happened with that case per Cook County was that a permit was unintentionally applied to that guy's property, which in return sent the value of his home into the $1 million range. So yeah, that'll get your property taxes to show up as $29,000 for sure. But the fact that mistake was made in the first place by Cook County should be embarrassing to them. Just flat out embarrassing. Moving on now to the history of Markham, as geologists say that 10,000 years ago, Markham was a beach along Lake Michigan. Over the years, the land between Markham and Lake Michigan became boggy swampland. Native American activity was huge in today's Markham, as it was a major crossing point with the boggy swampland to the north and east, creating sort of a natural boundary. Today's I-57 runs along a line through Markham that is historically significant, as it was known as the Indian Boundary Line. In 1816, the Potawatomi ceded the land northwest of the line to the U.S. government through the 1816 Treaty of St. Louis. Don't believe the city website for Markham if you look it up, because they have a typo saying that it was 1861, but no, it was 1816. Yeah, I never have typos. Never. At that, I never make any kind of mistake in any of my videos. Whoever published that mistake on the Markham website should be nothing but ashamed of themselves. Maybe they should go to the Markham library and ask for a book on the subject. That's if any of the former directors didn't steal those books, of course, to keep for their own personal book collection or maybe sell for some profit. But anyway, moving on now. European settlers started living in the modern-day Markham area around the 1830s. The first settlers were Yankee farmers, followed by German and Irish immigrants in the 1840s and 50s. One German immigrant in particular, Lawrence Rosner, planted 60 pine trees that came from Germany's Black Forest, in which only one of them still stood all the way until 1986. These trees were planted along the old Indian boundary line, but the lone standing tree in 1986 is why Markham has a pine tree in their city seal. Also, Rosner Park is named as such after the German immigrant who planted those trees. Mass amounts of people didn't start to populate the land that today is called Markham until the early 20th century. This map from 1892 shows absolutely nothing in the spot where Markham is today. The one diagonal line that you see cutting through the open space is the Dixie Highway. 8 years later, and you can see that South Lawn is now called Harvey, and it grew quite a bit, but still no Markham, just a swamp. Now on to the next map, which is from 1929, and this does show the name of Markham, but as you can tell, there's not much there at this point. That's because Markham didn't incorporate as a village until 1925, and it had fewer than 300 people living in it at first. The name Markham comes from then president of the Illinois Central Railroad, Charles H. Markham. The village incorporated due to wanting to stay independent from Harvey and potentially other surrounding cities that were already well established. The population of the Calumet region was growing fast around this time as Harvey was in its golden era with the thousands of industrial jobs being provided through the steel mills and other factories. Many of the people who settled down in Markham worked at those jobs in Harvey, so Markham was always considered to be a suburban, residential, single-family home community. That's right, Markham never had an identifiable downtown area, just some commercial zoning along the main thoroughfares through town, as if it's a neighborhood of a larger city. So outside of the significance of the Indian boundary line and the fact that Lake Michigan's shoreline used to extend all the way out here 10,000 years ago, there's not much of an interesting story to Markham unless you consider the dozens upon dozens of corruption cases that have occurred here in the modern era. Kind of cool, though, that the city pays homage to the German immigrant who planted the pine trees here that were native to Germany, even though none of the trees are standing anymore today. As time went on, the population continued to grow throughout the World War II era. Starting in the 1950s or so, Markham slowly but surely started to become a predominantly black community. By the year 2000, as much as 80% of Markham's population was black. Obviously, we all know that at this point, the blue-collar manufacturing jobs that built this place had mostly disappeared, so throughout the second half of the 20th century, not only did the community shift from being mostly white to being mostly black, but poverty rates were high and good-paying jobs were hard to come by. To make matters worse, in 1964, Markham started to see some of Chicago's street gang activity. It was one of the first suburbs to experience it. And around this time, the Chicago area was seeing race riots in not only the city proper, but throughout the suburbs including Harvey to the east. And Harvey is a city that Markham has always been closely associated with due to the fact that many of Markham's residents early on worked in the factories in Harvey. Well, in 1964, the Black Pea Stones came to Markham. The Black Disciples arrived shortly after. Not only did these gangs come to Markham, but they recruited young teenagers in the community, so gang membership was growing, and unfortunately, crime was rising in Markham throughout the late 60s. Well, one of the more notable cases involving gang members in Markham includes that in 1970 there was a U.S. Army veteran who was shot and left paralyzed by a Black P. Stones member. The veteran was Michael Weaver, and he was in town visiting with his family. Now, why would they attack a U.S. Army veteran? Well, here's why. Weaver was a former Black P. Stone member before he left to serve in the Army, and they believed that he ratted out his former gang members to the Markham chief of police before he bolted town 3 years prior. Weaver was able to survive, but like I said, he was paralyzed, and there were several members of the Black P. Stones involved in the situation that were arrested, but they were only given minor sentences. The shooter's name was Willie Tompkins, who was on bail for murdering a pizza delivery guy in Markham that he first tried to rob, although there was never any proof that he murdered the pizza delivery guy, so he was never sentenced for that. Later on in 1980, Tompkins was arrested for a double murder, but once again, not enough evidence with that case, so he was not sentenced in prison, at least for as much time as a double murder would put you in jail for. There were white gangs as well in Markham throughout the second half of the 20th century, but as you can imagine, the white gangs fought with the black gangs often, and the presence of these white gangs diminished over time as the white population of Markham continued to be a smaller percentage of the community. Another notable murder was in 1983 when a 40-year-old man named John F. Thomas was walking in the area of 160th and Wood Streets when he was approached by 8 Black P. Stone members. They demanded his wallet and he refused, so in return they beat him to death. There ended up being only $2 in his wallet anyway, so yeah, all that for that. But while gang activity still continues to have a presence in Markham, it's not near as bad as it used to be, and the amount of crime that has occurred in Markham during its worst years was never to the level of what was seen in Harvey. I mentioned not long ago about how the crime rates in Markham today are only slightly above the national average rate, so Markham is a community that has a lot of problems on its plate these days, but crime is not one of the worst problems. More so, it's corruption, it's the high property taxes, it's the economy, the fact that people continue to leave, lowering the city's tax base. So yeah, those problems outweigh the crime problems that occur here today. Poverty rates in Markham are high too, unfortunately so. Well, people, it is now that time.
You can't always trust the livability score from areavibes.com, but you can always trust Chris's livability score. Education.
High school students who live in Markham go to Bremen High School in the neighboring suburb of Midlothian. The school has poor academic performance overall, with only 8% of students proficient in math, only 10% proficient in reading, and only 21% are proficient in science. All of those are below the state averages for Illinois, although there certainly are worse off schools, but education gets a 4 out of 20.
Crime.
Crime isn't a problem here, it's more so the corruption, high taxes, population loss, and the lack of small businesses that are hurting Markham more than anything else. Crime gets a 10 out of 20.
Downtown.
There is no downtown Markham, that's easy. 0 out of 20 there. Once again, Markham grew as a residential village and it was filled with people who worked out of the factories in Harvey to the east. There was never an official downtown to Markham, and there likely never will be given the lack of economic growth for not only Markham but for the entire state of Illinois.
Economy.
The economy is poor here, obviously. High poverty rates, low median home values except for whenever the Cook County assessor comes around and dishes out extremely high property tax bills, but Markham's population is down by an estimated 5% since the last official census count for a reason, and it's because of the economy. Although things aren't near as bad here as they are in Harvey to the east. Economy still gets a pretty low score, 5 out of 20.
Recreation.
There are some things to consider when putting together the score for the recreation in Markham. The Indian Boundary Prairie Preserves are dotted throughout Markham. To the west, though, you have a pair of much more accessible parks, including Midlothian Meadows and the Oak Forest Heritage Preserve. Otherwise, the city has a below-average park system. It gets a 4 out of 20.
History.
Yeah, the history isn't really all that fascinating, mostly because Markham developed as a suburb. The Indian boundary line isn't unique to Markham, but that's all that's talked about on Markham history articles because that's all there is to talk about. Other than the theory of Lake Michigan's shoreline extending out to Markham 10,000 years ago, nothing was made in Markham. I mean, the steel mills and other factories were in Harvey, Blue Island, and elsewhere. No downtown area, so history gets a 6 out of 20.
Amenities.
Markham, like many South Chicago suburbs, is deprived of amenities. Businesses have continued to disappear over the years from the main thoroughfares, while the population continues to decrease, so there's less of a demand for businesses that way. However, Markham is close to Oak Forest, which has much more business than Markham, and on the other side of Oak Forest is a large suburban shopping area that has just about anything that anyone would need for day-to-day lives. Country Club Hills to the south also has plenty of amenities, so that sort of makes up for the lack of amenities within Markham. It gets a 7 out of 20.
Cost of living.
Cost of living in Markham should score a 20 out of 20 given the low home values, but because of the ridiculous property taxes here, and because of the corruption cases where municipal workers have stolen so much of Markham's tax revenue over the years, that money has to be made up from somewhere. It's not going to fall from the sky. I don't see a tax break coming for Markham residents anytime soon for 3 reasons. 1, being because it's Markham, 2, because it's in Cook County, and 3, because it's in the state of Illinois. So, 15 out of 20 on the cost of living. All in all, the Chris Livability score for Markham, Illinois is 51 out of 160, putting it in a tie with the nearby suburb of Calumet Park. There's a little bit of footage left from this video that I filmed but didn't use in this video, so to see more of what Markham looks like, make sure to check out my second video on Markham, and the link for that will be down below once it's uploaded. Also, Markham's reputation for having a high crime rate is a little bit unfair, but as you've learned in this video, the town has some major problems otherwise. And if you want to see a place with similar but worse problems, including a crime rate that lives up to the reputation, check out my video on the neighboring city of Harvey right here. Peace.